So the first step is to prepare your paper and template. Trace your block 4 times on a piece of plain 11 by 17 copier paper if you have it. If not, you can use a piece of your printing paper. Then you're going to take a piece of your printmaking paper and position it over your template, and then tape it down. Now the tape should be almost as long as the printing paper itself, and it should be very securely taped so that it won't come loose during your printing. Next, you're going to think about what color scheme you want to use for the print that you've already created. You're going to use either an analogous color scheme, which would be colors that are adjacent to each other on the color wheel, or a complementary color scheme that will be made up of colors that are directly opposite each other on the color wheel. Now you're going to mix the ink that you're going to use to create either your analogous color scheme or your complementary color scheme. Here I have some transparent base. This is ink with no pigment in it, and it just makes the colors more transparent, kind of like you were adding water to a watercolor. I've also got some yellow and some blue out, some white, which in the end I ended up not using. I take some of that transparency out of the jar, and I'm going to make a transparent blue. I'm going to work with an analogous color scheme, blues and greens, and I'm going to start by making a transparent blue. So I start with the transparency, add a couple drops. I was having a little trouble getting that ink to come out of that jar, but it doesn't take a whole lot of ink to make a color. The pigments are very strong, and so you can add just a little bit of pigment to some transparency and create a color that's quite usable. So mix it well, and then I test it on a little strip of paper. You can use any kind of scrap paper that you have to test your color and just see what kind of color it is that you've got and make adjustments if need be. Now I'm going to make my green color, so I've made enough blue there, and I'm going to start out with yellow. Remember, you always want to add the darker color to the lighter color. Mix it very well. Test it on a scrap of paper, pulling your knife across the sheet of paper. So now we're going to start to ink up the block just like we did in our first print. So this part will be familiar. You want to add a strip of ink about the width of your roller. Remember, we want to hear that nice sizzle sound when our ink is the right consistency. And be sure to ink the block from many different directions. You should hear a little sizzle sound on the block as well when you have enough ink there. So now we want to print each section of the grid. So I'm going to put 2 of my green color blocks on there. In other words, I'm going to print the green block twice. And I've already printed it once. I notice I've got ink on my hands, so I'm going to take a damp rag and wipe them off so I'm handling my paper with nice clean hands. And I've positioned that green block so it will go diagonal from the first block that I've printed. So the 2 lighter green blocks will be on a diagonal from one another. So after I've printed the 2 green blocks, I'm going to clean my roller and my block and switch to my second color. So this is a dark blue-green. It's still the analogous color scheme. I did end up making it darker than that blue color I had mixed originally. So it's a little darker value, similar in hue. So again, you want to roll out your ink so you have a nice slab. Ink your block from multiple directions. Print your block twice on the grid. So I've already printed that dark block once, and now I'm going to print it a second time to complete my grid. So I place it carefully on the grid. Check my hands to make sure I have clean hands when I'm handling my printing paper. I notice I've got a little smudge there on my template, so be careful about that kind of thing. Lay the paper down carefully, give a little press with your hand just to create that initial contact between ink and paper, and then use your wooden spoon to burnish the back. Now this will complete the background, and next week we'll print the pattern that we've carved on the other side of the block over this background color. And you can see examples of that in the slides that I've posted to Moodle. So carefully peel back the paper, take a look, make sure you've got a nice even pressure on there so that the ink is well transferred, and then carefully peel back. You can see I've got a little white gap in there. Don't worry about that. That's very common. Oftentimes the second layer of printing will take care of it. Remember to leave the paper on the template until the end of next week, when we'll be completely done with this project.